Very good. It's wonderful to hear.
That's great. I'll be posting an update about the ticketing platform after this meeting, and I have a meeting with the platform tomorrow morning to get some more information, but hoping to have that up as soon as possible. Okay, Nicole, you want to kick it off?
Ready to get started? Okay, well, I've been, bragging for quite some time now about knowing this guy named Andy who knows how to raise money for search and rescue, and it hasn't been a lie. Here he is. This is Andy, and he has put together a wonderful presentation for all of you because I know you've just been really wondering how it was that he was so successful in his fundraising efforts for search and rescue. So I'm going to let him go ahead and get started so that you all can see his presentation and ask him all the questions that have been burning.
Super. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. I want to can you go back a slide?
Sorry.
Haley? No problem. So I know this is a recorded event, but I'll go ahead and introduce myself as Andrew Toyota, and I'm the coordinator for the helicopter rescue team for Snohomish County Volunteer Search and Rescue. If you're not familiar with Snohomish County, it's located in Washington State. I think we serve a population of about 840,000 and change. Our team performs about 80 search and rescue missions annually. We respond to 9 different counties, and the majority of our team are all volunteers like Paul and myself and many others. What's unique about our capability is that we are able to put in the field a flight paramedic paired with a rescue tech. So we operate in some fairly technical terrain, whether it's glaciers or rock faces or boulders or waterfalls. We have a wide variety of different search and rescue missions that we participate in. About 10 years ago, we were a little surprised when we found out that our fuel and maintenance budget that was being funded by a federal grant was going to be eliminated. And so we, a bunch of us got together and decided to ask the community for help. And the response to that was pretty overwhelming. Folks like Paul and Miles and all these folks came out and to really support the team. And it was an incredible experience. And I'm going to walk through what I thought were 10 mindsets or principles that really worked well for us as a team. And I want to reemphasize that I know Nicole, with that gracious introduction, said, that was something that I did, but it was really something that we as a team pulled off. And I'm going to spend some time talking about that development and how we worked as a team. So hopefully some of these examples are things that resonate with your group as you're planning your fundraiser. But by all means, feel free to interrupt the presentation at any time, and I'm happy to field questions. So I guess Bailey or Nicole, just go ahead and interrupt and say someone has a question. Next slide. So this is Miles, but I'm going to draw on search and rescue analogies throughout. If you think about what it takes to find a missing climber on Mount Rainier or to rescue a hiker that's pinned underneath a 10-ton boulder, these are pretty complicated missions with a lot of moving parts. And if you've never had to put together that operational plan before, it's kind of an overwhelming task. And so that's kind of where my teammate Miles McDonough and I started. We co-chaired this fundraising campaign. I think ultimately it raised about $400,000 over a 15-month period. And I just want to be clear that when we started, we had zero fundraising experience. We were 2 guys in orange suits. We were like a hasty team. We were very small, we were highly motivated, and we were pretty mobile and prepared to look for clues. So if you don't have that experience, the question that you might ask is, well, how do you get that experience really quickly? And certainly so much what you're doing in terms of asking other experienced fundraisers what they did and listening to their advice. What we wanted to do is kind of figure out the ropes for ourselves without committing a lot of resources. So going to the next slide. So here's an example of starting small, something that Miles came up with. And very early on, we decided that we wanted to sell t-shirts. And I say sell, it was really a donation level where you donated $50 and then you got a t-shirt. And our idea was that we wanted to use the proceeds of this to fund the fundraiser. So, this isn't too surprising, but we recruited a graphic designer, we brainstormed on support the last resort as a brand, as a message. We tied it to our social media campaign, and ultimately we generated about $33,000. And the thing that we learned from that experience was that as a SAR person, we were really good at offering help, but we really weren't so good at asking for help. And it was a really uncomfortable, kind of unfamiliar feeling for us. And so by starting small, we're able to kind of practice our elevator pitch, if you will. Was that too ambiguous of a request? Was it too lengthy of an ask? Before doing a radio interview or a podcast, we were able to kind of figure out, how do we deliver our message? And then you get to see how people respond to that message. So, early on, we kind of felt like, well, SAR is a very serious undertaking. It has life and death consequences. And that was kind of the message that we were delivering. And what we got back as feedback was that while people appreciated the cause, it wasn't really fun. And fun actually gets people to donate more. And so we kind of wove that fun element, and you'll see it throughout the presentation, of how we tried to make sure that all of our meetings, all of our engagements were all kind of fun. And this is one example. We thought that the black t-shirts were really the right thing for us to be selling. And in fact, the pink t-shirts and the child size t-shirts were the ones that people really seemed to appreciate. So that's just one example. Next slide. And Nicole or Bailey, I actually am now full on in my presenter mode, so I can't actually see you. So if anyone does have a question or you want to interrupt, just go ahead and holler, okay?
And Nicole, if you see questions in the chat, can you read those aloud? Because I can't see the chat from my view.
I will do that. Thank you, guys.
Okay, super. So step 2, collaborate, support. This is kind of an obvious step in any type of campaign, but this was something that I thought was pretty crucial for our particular campaign. It's often something that gets overlooked. As you're aware, that search and rescue is full of action personality types who will drop anything and everything at a moment's notice just to go help a complete stranger. But this type of person isn't necessarily the same personality type who's going to try to figure out, well, who's going to be impacted by this fundraiser, and what are their concerns, what are their expectations. And so we were really fortunate to have Bill Quistorf, who was or is our chief pilot, and he's a deputy within the sheriff's department, to be our key advisor and liaison. And I would credit him 100% with being responsible for helping us navigate a lot of the political landmines, if you will, that could have easily stonewalled our overall campaign. So we brainstormed a lot with the leaders within our organization, within SAR and Everett Mountain Rescue. We talked about, well, what are the objectives? What are the risks? What are the approaches? And to no surprise to anyone in SAR, we documented that plan so that everybody knew what it was, who, when is it going to occur? Why is it happening? Who's going to be involved? Who's our target? And we made sure that that plan was super simple and very clear, and everyone was on board. And I think that's a step that helped us make sure that even though our army of volunteers continued to grow, everybody knew which direction to push, if you will. Go ahead, next slide.
Andy, I have a question about this slide.
Yeah.
And if you go into this in detail later, then disregard. But would you mind going over the contacts and those roles, and what were the responsibilities of each of those people?
Sure. How about if I do that towards the end?
Yes.
And just remind me. Okay. Because I think some of it will come out in the presentation, but I'll refer back to that.
Perfect.
third principle, empower your team. So I'm going to jump ahead in the timeline from when we first started the fundraiser to the day of the fundraiser. This is a photo of the checking in process or the payment of all these bid items and auction items. And the reason why I wanted to call this out was the person in the lower corner. His name is Matt Mitchell. And at the time, Matt is a brand new member of Everett Mountain Rescue. And he quickly became our tech go-to guy who took care of our social media presence, our credit card payments, our customer relationship system. These are all things that Miles and I had no idea that we even needed, right? And so when he came to us to say, hey, I'm interested, I want to help, we had no idea that down the road, these are things that would be incredibly important for us to pull off a successful fundraiser. And on the actual day of the event, we had a number of guests who would come up to us just on their own to say that they have gone to 100 fundraisers or more, and they were just floored by how painless and easy it was to register and pay for items and get through that whole process seamlessly. And a lot of that credit goes to Matt and his team. So going back to the beginning of kickstarting this campaign, Miles and I aren't even thinking about payments or CRS systems. We're just trying to figure out, where do we start? And so we didn't even know what we didn't know. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this slide and talking about how you build that team, because I think it's incredibly important and it relates to the success of the outcome of the fundraiser itself. The first point is to include everyone. Initially, I think and this is pretty natural, that if you're going to do a fundraiser within search and rescue, you kind of turn to the people within search and rescue. But we started having people come out of the woodworks from everywhere. This person knew somebody who could help us get to X, Y, or Z. And we threw out the notion very early on that the help was only going to be search and rescue. In fact, at one point during our campaign, we had probably 75% of our team were people who weren't even in SAR. They were folks who were helping us with marketing, with graphic design, advertising, production, event planning, you name it. Liz, Naomi, Daphne, Julie were just, to name some of the few amazing volunteers who just totally gave of their time. And on that note of time, I think one of the other key components of building your team is respecting their time. Just because people are volunteering doesn't mean that their time is free. It's literally free to us, but it's not free to them. There's always something else that they could be doing. And so the way we translated that into building our team was we made sure our meetings started on time. We limited the time that it would take. If it ran over any type of meals, we would try to provide meals. We always had an agenda. We served up the minutes immediately afterwards. And we tried to keep everyone prioritized and focused on, this is the mission, this is what we're trying to do. And we kind of cut out everything else. And then the third component, again, maybe these are all super obvious things, but we didn't know these things at the time, is we really wanted them to lead. I think I heard on another Zoom call how difficult it is for search and rescue people to be interested in fundraising. And there's always other things that they'd rather be doing. And one of the things that we discovered is that the more we could get our teammates out in front of the cause, the more the public saw them connected to that cause, the more those individuals became personally committed to the outcome of that cause, and the easier it was for us to get work done. So I'm going to speak a little bit more about this on the next slide. Go ahead and go to the next slide. But we trained and trained and trained, just like we do in search and rescue. You don't just join search and rescue and then the next day you do a mission. You spend countless of days working, hoist, checklists, all the types of things to make sure that when a mission occurs, you're able to execute. And that's no different than this in terms of fundraising. We plan probably over a dozen mini events to get our message out to the public. And these would all involve small teams, anywhere from 1 to 4 people would be involved, of a corporate giving event like at Microsoft, or book signings, or a music lounge, a brewery. anywhere where we could get our brand and our message out on print, radio, we would try to do. And we did this for 3 reasons. I think, like I mentioned earlier, it gave us time for everyone to practice their pitch. So it got the whole team that level of experience. So by the time we had 75 volunteers all, at the event itself, and a TV camera crew would show up and say, "Why are you doing this?" It didn't really matter who it was. Everybody was pretty seasoned and familiar with how to answer that question. Like I mentioned earlier, it also increased the internal commitment that people had. If someone came to us with, "Hey, I got this possible option for the Nectar Lounge," Miles and I would play a supportive role, and we would do that so that there would be a consistent messaging. But whichever teammate brought that to our attention, they would normally be the lead on that, and we would try to support them however we could. Then the last point that we did is, or the last reason why we did this is, I think we severely underestimated how much it takes to get the word out about your fundraising event. And you really can't do this enough in terms of hitting the pavement and getting that message out over and over again. And in this process of going through this training, you also start discovering who your table captains are. You start figuring out how to get donated goods or services for the event itself. And then I'll get to the bid items and the services coming up. But all of this starts building a contact list, and your contacts list just continues to grow and continues to grow. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So the 5th principle that I titled was beware of the big kahuna. So what I mean by this is 6 months into our planning, we got word that there was this mystery donor, and they were wanting to donate $250,000. And our reaction was immediate, and it was understandable. We were all instantly relieved. We dropped everything. We made sure that we had special meetings that we called with the stakeholders, and everybody was super excited because our target was $150,000. And so if we got this, we'd be done. Everyone could go back to training and responding to missions. And I'm quite grateful. I wasn't at the time, but now in hindsight, I'm thankful that that mystery donor never came through. And the reason why I say that is because, just as easy as if that person were to have found us, they could easily have, their attention could shift. And the next year or the year after that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to continue supporting your organization. So that, Big Kahuna could be a wealthy individual, like it was in our case. It could be REI or Mercy Hospital. It always happens when I see this within fundraising, is people get kind of fixated on that big target. And what I would say to you as a SAR team is that when you go through this experience, you're going to gain a tremendous amount of not only experience, but confidence of pulling off a very successful fundraiser. And so now you're in a much more sustainable position, so that if you need new team uniforms, or you need radios, or the next search and rescue vehicle, you have the ability to go through this process and pull it off. And I think initially we may have closed on $325,000, but I think another $75,000 came in afterwards, even after the fundraiser was done. And I think that was because of the strength of the network that was created, as opposed to just going after one wealthy donor or one corporation. So that leads me to the next slide. And so here's an example of what I'm talking about. When we started, I have a background in market research, and we kind of brainstormed around all these different organizations that we wanted to target, and who does SAR appeal to, and what's that cross section, and how we were going to find out more about them and cold call, or try to connect and get through that front door. And we tried everything. And I think after about 4 months of just banging our heads, we threw that plan out of the window. And what we learned is that help is going to come from the oddest of places. It's going to come from everywhere. And this slide is a look at how we were able to raise the 400,000. Some of them make sense, in terms of their appeal to the outdoors, the mountaineers, or Black Diamond and BCA. But a lot of these companies got connected to us because of that number one rule in fundraising. And that rule is, if you go to the next slide, is that people are connecting with people. The corporations are really these faceless entities that have a lot of people banging on their door asking for a handout, and we're just kind of competing with that, that noise, if you will. And so instead of focusing on, trying to get our cause through that door, we kind of shifted our strategy, and we focused on communicating very quickly and swiftly with whoever would connect with us. And so that brought us an already interested customer. It was way easier to close on them or find out how to connect with them to someone else. And it also kept our team excited and confident that we had a plan and that plan was working, because I will say that nothing defeats or deflates your confidence faster than getting told no over and over and over again. And so this was a way that we kept the yes going over and over. Okay, next slide. So we had some initial success. We had top-down support and grassroots support. We had a motivated and empowered team with some training under our belt. And so it was now time to kind of figure out, well, what do we want to do for the fundraiser? And so I'm going to kind of switch gears a little bit and go into some of the more tactics of what we did. We wanted to throw a very festive social evening. We wanted a cocktail hour where folks could mingle, and then we wanted a sit-down dinner show portion where we would have an auctioneer and a, kind of an entertainment that happened throughout the evening. So during the cocktail hour, we wanted our guests to mingle. This is just one of, I think, 3 rooms that we had of silent auction items. In fact, I even see Paul in this picture. But we had our search and rescue team members decked out in their uniforms. We would often station them close to a bid item that they may have been responsible for bringing in. And what that did was, it was an instant icebreaker. As soon as we had a guest kind of look at that auction item and check it out, our team member could personalize it even more. Why was it significant? What did it mean to either themselves or SAR? And so this was just a way of connecting again with the people. So I'm going to switch to the next slide, number 6. Are we all good, Bailey?
Nicole, is there any questions in the chat there?
No questions yet, guys.
Okay, super. I'm going to just keep rolling. So, so number 6 was kind of try to think creatively when you're thinking of your auction items. You can get some truly fantastic ideas from your team. This photo was a pretty easy one. My wife and I have a restored 87 VW 4x4 van. It can sleep 4. It has a fridge, a sink, a stove. It goes anywhere. So putting together a weekend package on that was really straightforward. But where we started kind of really trying to get creative was, what does search and rescue have that other fundraisers don't have access to? And so, for example, we wanted our guests to kind of dive into that emergency responder ambiance. We parked, I think, fire trucks and police jeeps and rescue vehicles, leading into the event. We wanted to use SAR gear to decorate the walls and ceilings. We really wanted our guests to be immersed in the fact that they are part of this. They're part of helping others. And so for the bid items themselves, we wanted to continue thinking creatively and tap into our network and say, well, let's see, could we arrange a ride along with Danny Wickstrom, our SAR deputy? The answer to that was no. Could we arrange a guided trip, up some, local mountain with our mountain rescue unit? Again, for liability reasons, the answer was no. And so if you go to the next slide, one of our outstanding pilots, Jen, said, well, hey, I would be willing to take someone on a private helicopter tour around the Cascades. Do you think anyone would be interested in something like that? And we said, yeah, that sounds fantastic. What do you think the value for that would be? And she said, well, maybe $500. what happened in reality was there's so much demand for Jen's helicopter tour that the bidding went up to $3,400, and the auctioneer, who knew what he was doing, kind of put Jen on the spot and said, "Hey, are you willing to do a second tour?" And then he turned around and he offered that to the person that came in second place, who was super disappointed, and said, "Well, you can have this for $3,400." And so that was, I think, that package was one of our most highest selling items, and that was purely just one of our members saying, "Hey, this is something that I have happy to offer up that you couldn't find elsewhere." Other ways that search and rescue. Sorry, next slide. Other ways that search and rescue can tap into, of course, the ever popular canine is always a crowd pleaser, where you bring your canine to the classroom and you help teach the kids about scent theory and so forth. But if you think creatively from a search and rescue standpoint, and you think about your membership and all the various skills that they have, you can come up with some really dynamic and interesting packages that will sell well. So we had sailboat cruises and wine tasting packages and swim lessons and backcountry ski lessons, and they were all tailored around the search and rescue theme. In fact, I guess what I would note is that we had very little products like Arc'teryx jackets and things like that. We wanted to think of things that you couldn't get at other fundraisers. So that kind of leads me to the 7th tip, which is the next slide. And that is really think through crafting unique experiences, things that you can't get elsewhere. And so from our curated list of, I think we had about 100 items, we picked, I think, 12, a dozen or so of the most unique experiences for the live auction part of our evening, and experiences that we thought, okay, we think this will generate maximum interest. And so to do that, as an example, I asked a good friend of mine, and he's an alpine ski guide, Martin Volken, in this area, if he would be willing to donate a backcountry ski trip for the Pacific Northwest. And when we were out in Norway, I decided to record him speaking to the audience, and he was describing the beauty of the mountains. And he just ended with this classic Martin quip of, "And if you don't like this, then I can't help you." And it just sort of, when we showed that during the live auction, we got an immediate response and a lot of interest by the people. And if you can go to the next slide. But that wasn't enough. We wanted to figure out, well, that's great that we can get a guided trip from a very popular local guide, but how can we make it even more over the top? And so we had another person come to us, another out of the woodworks, and he offered up this burly snow track. And we said, okay, let's package that with Martin's offer to create a very unique experience where you could have 4 or 6 people in luxury kind of going through the Forest Service Road and up a mountain, and then have Martin kind of guiding them, swooshing down the mountain. So if you can find ways to make very unique experiences, those experiences are going to bring in a lot more than just your ordinary fundraiser item. And I'll end as far as the bid items on this one. Besides unique experiences, there's also unique items. And so via that empowered team that I was referring to, we found out that one person knew another person that knew another person that was dating a Seahawks wide receiver. And so through that channel, we said, okay, well, what if we bought 2 footballs and sent it to Doug Baldwin? And would he be willing to sign it? And in return, we would send him an extra large Support the Last Resort t-shirt and ask him if he would be willing to wear that. And so you can do things like that. And I think the footballs might have gone for about $3,000. So again, a pretty popular item that had a lot of interest. Okay, so I talked about earlier about making it fun, and I'm going to spend just a few moments on this part of, you really want to, what we found to be effective was integrating fun throughout the event. So we introduced a game, a lot of pay-to-play games like Heads or Tails, where people paid $10 to win an iPad that was donated. And if they bought that raffle, we gave them this glow necklace that showed that they were participating. And what was really funny was that people were walking around with these necklaces, and the people that didn't have them would want to know, well, how did you get that necklace? And so we started having people, buy things just for the necklace, let alone the actual game itself. But the game, if you haven't played Heads or Tails, was where, right before the live auction, the auctioneer had everyone who was participating stand up in the room, and they would place their hands on their head or hands on their tail to indicate their choice. And then the auctioneer would flip a coin. And if you guessed right, you remained standing. And if you were wrong, you sat down. And I think people had more fun putting their hands on their tails than actually winning the iPad. So it was a great icebreaker, but it got everyone kind of laughing and joking. Here's another example in terms of this screenshot where we had a dessert dash. And we were brainstorming around the menu, and we're kind of thinking about how much everything was going to cost for this sit-down dinner. And then someone mentioned, well, what about a dessert dash? And so if you're not familiar with a dessert dash, that's where everybody on the table will bid a certain amount, and then the table captain totals up that amount and hands it in. And so during the dessert phase of the evening, the auctioneer would call out 3 tables, starting with the highest, whoever gave the most, and they would have that time to dash to the dessert table to claim which dessert they wanted. And I think just this, instead of costing us money, it raised, I think, another $11,000. And all the desserts were artfully baked. They were all donated by the community. And, I will still give my friend Pete a hard time about this, where his dessert, which was a homemade blueberry pie, went for $1,500. And the way he made it fun was he baked in a helicopter into the crust. And so, that was his way of making it fun. And again, it was able to bring in even more money. Next slide. This was another example of how to make the event fun. We did a golden ticket raffle. This item was a generous donation from a good friend of mine who had a house on the private island of Lanai. I think it's perched right next to the Four Seasons Fairway. But we sold tickets, golden ticket of $50, and we limited it to 100 tickets. And it was an extremely competitive event. You can go to the next slide. But I think when the auctioneer finally announced who the winning ticket was at the end of the evening, there were audible groans I remember hearing, as many of us, including myself, wanted to win this. So that was another way of making it competitive and making it fun. The last thing I'm going to mention about, you can go to the next slide. You should see the last resort IPA. We wrestled with the decision of whether or not we should serve alcohol or not, given that we're a search and rescue organization. And we concluded that people were going to probably spend more time if alcohol was available. So we hired a cab service to shuttle anyone home free of charge. I think several guests took advantage of it. But we had a large number of wine and beer and specialty cocktails, all themed around the last resort, that were all donated. We had this local brewery, Kulshan, who agreed to make a last resort IPA, and they would sell it and then provide some of the proceeds back to us and donate that back to our program. We even made up t-shirts. We had beer glasses for it, and we used the glasses at the event. We encouraged people to take it home, and now many of us still use these glasses, in fact. And it's a really nice reminder. It's one of my favorite drinking glasses, but it's a really nice reminder that folks have, even to this day, to be reminded about that event and our helicopter rescue program. So yeah, let me go ahead and move on. Another decision that worked pretty well for us was hiring a professional auctioneer, Fred Northup Jr. He does a lot of auctions in the Pacific Northwest, but we decided to pair him up with one of our volunteers, a very charismatic Norwegian named Oyvind, who was our HRT coordinator at the time. And we scripted out exactly what they were going to say, but we gave them a lot of leeway to ad lib for effect. But one of the comments that our guests provided about the evening was it wasn't just entertaining. It carried a certain level of integrity that they really hadn't experienced in other fundraisers. And so one example of that was when this fundraiser was going on, it overlapped with our recovery efforts that was happening for the Oso mudslide. And so when the on-duty crew finished up their assignment for that day, I think they came straight to the event and they were still decked out in their uniform and vest. And I think I recall Fred and Oyvind making sure that their entrance was recognized and connecting what they're doing in terms of their service to the community, to the audience. And again, trying to make that connection so that the audience was feeling it in real time and that they were part of this. They were part of helping others. And I thought that was a really powerful moment during the event itself. If you can go to the next slide. So similar to why we're all here, another way we brought the audience into our mission was by showing a short film. This was done by another film producer, Ben Lucas, who volunteered his time outside of search and rescue. And it told the story of a fallen climber on Mount Goody and what our team was able to do to help him. And so, for all the reasons that you're familiar with, it helped the audience connect with the cause. And if you can go to the next slide, I think one of the fortuitous things that actually occurred was once the film concluded, someone that we had rescued recently gave a totally impromptu, very passionate speech from his wheelchair, crediting the team for saving his life during a snowmobile accident. And I don't think there was a dry eye in the audience after this guy was finished speaking. So when it came time to ask for helping fund a need, the paddles literally started flying up in the air. I think we set various donation levels starting at $5,000 down to $100. And I think just this portion of the evening raised about $50,000. So it's incredibly generous by the community, but it was all, it all came together because of all the principles that we've talked about in the last 40 minutes. And I'll close on this, principle number 10 about being ready to act. I think part of the SAR mindset is that, you need to be ready to act because you don't know when that pager is going to go off. It could occur in the middle of the night, at a family barbecue, but you need to always be ready. And so when that accident of the Oso mudslide happened, SCV SAR and Everett Mountain Rescue were both ready to help, and the community responded by coming together and recognizing a lot of those first responders who helped, and the president came out to recognize them as well. And we were fortunate that we had a lot of these principles integrated. We had our event planned, we were ready to respond to it. And so that was incredibly fortunate timing that we were able to use that this whole event for maximum exposure and to ask for help so that we could help others. And what I would conclude with is that, this is almost 10 years later, and now Nicole and Bailey's film is here with yet another opportunity to provide maximum exposure for SAR organizations throughout the country, internationally as well. And, this gift that they're giving to search and rescue is going to help deliver this message to people from all walks of life. And it can only help us. And so the question, that I would ask is, are you ready to act? And I'm happy to, continue helping folks. If you have questions, and you can reach out to me, Nicole and Bailey have my contact information. But I think that some of the things that I talked about take time to develop, but it doesn't necessarily have to take as long as we did. It's just what we gave ourselves. And I guess I'll stop there and see if there are any questions. I'm going to switch screens here so that I can see all your faces. Go ahead, back to you.
Wow, Andy, thank you so much. That was so engaging. I loved your presentation, and I got so many ideas about how people could, even just take bits and pieces. But we've been telling people all along that this movie is kind of the start of a conversation that's a bit longer of a process. And to pull off something like what you achieved, they'll need more time than what they have to do it before the film. But I think like this gives people so much information on how they can really do some major impact of things for their organizations here coming up in the future. So thanks so much for your information and your guidance.
Paul, I want to recognize, was there anything that you wanted to say? I know you were there for the fundraiser as well and part of this experience. Is there anything that you wanted to add?
I just, I don't like speaking. No, I think a big part of fundraising there was we did have a couple different people that we had recently rescued, and that was hearing their story, I think really kind of opened up donations. So if just not just this is who we are, but have people actually speaking of their rescues and how it affected them, like Nicole and her story. Yeah.
Got it.
Just one question. You had said the focus was replacing this grant for to keep the helicopter program going. Was that your main focus going out in your advertising as you went and at the event? Or?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So, when we started the campaign, we were trying to figure out how do we replace this, budget of $150,000. And as we got closer and closer to the event itself, we had I think it was the Snohomish County Council and the Sheriff's Department both stepped in to provide that immediate relief for this year and the following year. And just to be clear, the Sheriff's Office continued to support that for the last 10 years. So it's been a very sizable contribution that they've made to the program. So to answer your question, yes, that was our goal, was to find that level of support, not just in the actual one-time donations, but the ongoing support for the program itself, so that we weren't reliant on this federal grant that had been really the core of how our program was able to operate. Did I answer your question? Yeah,
that's very good. And the helicopter you use, is it owned by the Sheriff's Department, or who actually owns the helicopter that you use? Yeah, in our county, the sheriff owns the helicopter, and the volunteers, we come up with a lot of the rescue equipment that the helicopter needs. So yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
Andy, if you wouldn't mind elaborating some more on the roles, and also thinking if there was a smaller scale event, what key roles would you say are must-haves?
Got it. Okay. I will thank you for reminding me. So we had a whole org chart of a marketing, day of the event, logistics, advertisement. We had someone doing the decorations for the event itself, someone locking down all of the bid items in terms of having those all packaged and ready to go. I talked about Matt and his the customer relationship system and the payment. So there are multiple levels of roles that occurred on the day of, but they were very separate and distinct from the campaign itself. Miles and I served as the co-chairs, and we were kind of the jack of all trades, where we just kind of ran around as a glue, trying to connect all these pieces or to support some of our folks, but we had someone who continually helped us with the graphic design, someone that was in charge of the film production, similar to what you're doing, Bailey and Nicole. We had someone that was in charge of acquiring all the bid items themselves leading up to the event. We had, let's see, who am I missing? That I'm probably missing a couple other key roles, but I would say we probably had 5 or 6 of us on a day-to-day basis where we would be exchanging emails and kind of finding out, did that get tracked down? Did anyone follow up with so-and-so? And Miles and I would always be where the buck kind of stopped in terms of making sure that those things got done. So hopefully I answered your question, Bailey. If not, go ahead and try again.
No, I think it's great to hear about all the people that were involved.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to look at, like similar again to like a SAR mission and all the people that are involved in, trying to rescue a hiker that's trapped under a boulder. If you look at it from that view, you're kind of like, wow, this is a lot of people, and I don't have that many people. I can't do that. But it really does start with the first step. You don't need to have that massive amounts of people. You can just kind of scale small and just say, okay, well, we're going to do something at the Tractor Tavern. We need a flyer. How are we going to do a flyer? We need to get that out somehow, digitally or otherwise. We need to secure maybe a couple items that people could bid on. We need to think about what we want to say, and we just need to talk to the person. And literally, we would bang that out in maybe 20 or 30 minutes of once we got rolling. But it was getting that going on it so that you just had this cookie cutter approach where it's like, okay, well, we've got another one of those. Let's just go ahead and take that template and do it again and again and again. And so, I would encourage all the SAR teams to not necessarily look at it as, well, gosh, we don't have 75 volunteers. We can't possibly pull that out. I bet that you could actually pull it out if you had 2 really super motivated individuals that just sort of egged each other on, similar to how you guys are able to construct such a beautiful film. I know a lot more people were involved in it, but if you've got those 2 that are the core that kind of instigate that, you can be super successful. So that would be my response. Anything else?
I'll throw a question at you. If you were going to go smaller scale and give them some kind of advice on what they could do for this film screening that they're doing in just a couple months, it seems like trying to personalize it at the end of the film is what we've been guiding them towards. Like, is there any way that you can get somebody that you rescued or one of your search and rescue members to stand up at the end and personalize? Would that be your advice based on what? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you kind of, you open the floodgates with your film of, getting the person watching it understands, how, they're just starting to kind of question, oh, wow, I didn't know that that's what search and rescue could do, or I'm now emotionally connected to this story. And if you can then make that transition from this story to your local community and how to give and support, I think that would be an incredibly effective way of leveraging that gift that you're providing to then focusing it and channeling it to their direction. Otherwise the natural tendency would just be to kind of go back to the film and the film subject and say, well, that's what drew me in. How can I help Nicole? Or what Nicole's interested in, and I think if I were to be that SAR organization, I would be thinking about, okay, yeah, how do we leapfrog and go and take that energy that people are going to have that positive experience and channel that directly in our direction. So that would be one thing. I do think it takes some experience. So I would I would say even though the event is in April, that, if there's any opportunity to do any type of, sample fundraising in between now and then, something very small scale, even if it involves 10 or 12 people, what's important is that you get that experience, and you learn how to ask. And I remember, I think Allison, talking about, kind of wanting to fill a theater and only getting 200 people. Well, you learn very quickly, when you start with a small scale, you start discovering those parameters. What is your message? What's the reaction? How can you grow that? And I think if you just dive right into it, of trying to plan the absolute best fundraiser that you can ever pull off, as your first go, at least we're not wired that way. We had to kind of slowly creep up on it and gain that experience because we had no fundraising experience. So. Anything, did I answer your question, Nicole? Sometimes I just go way off track.
Yes, you did great. The
Okay.
only, the other thing that I feel like would be important for people to hear about is, how did you grow your contact list? Did you just start with, let's make a list of people that I know that might be willing to help? Or how did that, because it seems like that's kind of one of the keys to being successful, is just to grow that contact list.
That's a really good question. And I wish I could claim credit for being able to grow that contact list, but I'm going to throw that back in Miles's direction. Miles isn't on this call, but he has this incredible gift of being just a really fun, energetic partner, and he was also super connected within the community, and so he had a certain level of connections in his community. I had a certain number of connections in my community, and we both leveraged those to the hilt. And we started bringing in people who had connections to other people, who had connections to other people, and that's how it grew. And so, I think that if I were to, transport myself and you pick me up and put me in Arizona or California and another search and rescue, I would probably talk with, as a consultant to the person doing the fundraising, and I'd say, just walk me around your group. Let me meet your team of people, because I can guarantee I can find the fun person, right? The person that, what I'm talking about. They know everyone. People want to be around them. People are excited to be around them. And that's the person that you want to target and say, hey, come join my team, and just provide a little bit of time, because the context that they'll be able to provide you, you'll be able to leverage, and you'll be able to grow your network. And so that's what I feel like we did successfully with Miles and my contacts is, those fun people in our network, we grew it from them, and we kept growing it so that we could connect the dots, and they ended up just knowing everyone, so that's how I'd answer that.
That's great advice. Did you guys end up, did you ever think about partnering with other, like maybe the fire department, or, if you were a smaller organization that didn't have a lot, would you say that might be a successful way to kind
Yeah.
of get the
Yeah.
ball?
So super good point. And I kind of glossed, well, I didn't really explain that. But in the very beginning, when we thought about the helicopter rescue and the budget, that was all about helicopter rescue, right? And we have a team of about 30 or so volunteers. And so initially we were thinking, okay, well, that's our team size. And then we kind of looked across the aisle to Everett Mountain Rescue, and they had, I think maybe at the time, 80 to 90 volunteers. And we thought, okay, well, how can we partner with them, and not make it just where it's about the helicopter, even though it was about our funding? How could we make it so that we could tap into their network of contacts and their resources, and all the things that the Mountain Rescue could offer? And so we met with their organization, and we had to make sure that they had skin in the game. And so we, again, going back to that event plan, we made it really clear What are the objectives that both organizations want to gain out of it financially? How are we going to split that? And, you know, that was our fire department, if you will, of gaining more access. It wasn't just the people, but it was all that contacts. And as you alluded to earlier, that's how we were able to kind of snowball and, you know, 15 months later, have all these ideas for auction items and so forth that we probably couldn't have gotten if we just stayed within our little sphere, our little world.
That's super helpful. I think that helps to kind of broaden for a lot of organizations there. You know, we have a vast array of resources between the teams. Some are small and some are larger and have more members. And so just that context of like, even you guys even had to partner with another organization to make this possible. So it's something that is achievable if you just kind of reach beyond. I think sometimes that'll be helpful to invite your neighbors along on the ride.
Absolutely. Yep.
Does anyone else have any burning questions before we let Andy go on with his day?
No, just thanks everybody for their time. That was great. Thank you.
Super.
Okay. Well, thanks again, Andy. It's been just really wonderful to be able to pick your brain and get everyone access to what you know, because I think that it's really going to help them to be more successful with their events moving forward. So, debted of gratitude towards you, and we really do appreciate your time.
Absolutely. And like I said, if folks want to follow up, you have my contact info. I'm happy to field some questions and kind of pay it forward. Other people helped us, and we're happy to, or I'm happy to continue helping others, especially in search and rescue. So by all means, they're free to contact me.
Andy, Facebook.
Yes.
We have a group, a Facebook group with all the chapters involved in the event. So we'll get you on in that group. That would be great.
Not all the chapters, because I don't have Facebook.
Have you been getting our emails? Is that working for you?
Email's working. Yeah, I can't. Facebook isn't going to work for me. So I've tried. It's not happening.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you. That was amazing.
Yeah.
And Nicole, can I give you a buzz after this?
Yeah, go right ahead.
All right.
Okay.
Bye, everyone. Have a great night.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.